All right, are we live? I screwed it up. I accidentally clicked on it. I
Hey,
was
we're
like,
live
oh,
now. We're live
I'll
now,
let it
baby.
run. All right, hey, we're live. So, welcome everybody. This is I don't even know what I'm going to call this thing. I don't know if it's going to, it's goofing off with that thumbnail, if it's Papa Panda's Power Hour or whatever. But anyway, Mr. Todd Lewis, Mr. Praise of Folly, I appreciate you coming on. How you been?
Oh, it's been wild out there, but the
All
first
right.
10 days of Trump are wild.
Oh, dude, that's been, that has been something. Yes, indeed. But yeah, I was thinking I was getting this thing going, and I was like, oh, who can I have on? And you had to be the first guy on here. I appreciate you had me back on a day. I think it was last year. Had me on, and I was talking homesteading or something. And I was like, oh yeah, you got to be first one on here. Plus,
Nice.
if you want to bring us into the subject, what are we talking about tonight?
Oh yeah, PC strategy games. That's the pastime of champions right there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now I have a little bit of experience with this. I did some Age of Empires, did some Lords of the Realm. What got you into the strategy games, my man?
Well, you see, this is what's interesting, right? I'm old enough to remember when Age of Empires: Rise of Rome was new, and that was in 1998. Um, okay, so growing up, I was always exposed to computers and computer stuff because my dad was a computer programmer. And also just that was his hobby, computers. He also played some games. We're talking like 30 years ago. Um, and somehow I was surfing the net and I saw this game called Age of Empires. And I just saw like the little villagers and an elephant and a lion. And I'm like, what the heck is this? This looks amazing. And uh, I eventually got a copy. I forget when or how. And I played it. And I'm just like, whoa, this is amazing. Now, the other thing about Age of Empires that's amazing too is the original. And by the way, I have an original copy with the fold-out tech tree with the manual. It's the manual's a bit banged up, but it's still the original. Um, they had a history of all the civilizations, the Syrians, Egyptians, blah 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 blah, and that's what got me into history. That's what got me into this whole arc that I'm now doing online. I was when I'm like probably 11 or 12, and when my parents would go out to eat, I would just take that book with me and I'd read about the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Persians and the Greeks. And I'm a kid, I don't know this is real history. And then my dad's like, "Oh, this is actually history. You actually get books on these civilizations." And I'm like, "Really?" So that's how it started.
Yeah, that's perfect. I know I did not jump in as early as you on the Age of Empires series. My introduction to it was the second one, but however, I feel like I got it for Christmas from somebody. And however, it had that big, it was like 280, 350 pages in there of exactly what you're saying. Ran through the Teutonic Knights and the different civilizations. And I'm trying to think, well, this was pre samurai because that was the expansion, but it was wild. Exactly what you said. The amount of information and history that I was learning from the video game.
Well, the other thing that I would do, you mentioned Age of Empires 2 now. When you logged in to Age, well, not logged in, this is before logging into anything like that. When you loaded up the game by putting the CD in the drive, there'd be the main screen where you could like go to the campaign, go to skirmishes, go to map editor. But I believe it was in the bottom left. You could go to what like was essentially the library, and you could read about the Middle Ages. You could, as a general theme, you could read about the Persian, the Byzantine Empire, the English, the Spanish, the Chinese, and I would just log in and just read that. I wouldn't even play the game. I would just, I was so excited to read all that.
Oh yeah, well, so that was my introduction to. Oh, there were two Romes, and there was like two Christendoms, and who were these Byzantine guys, and why were we upset? It was wild. It was totally it was mind melting and completely mind blowing and expanding for my I don't know 10, 11-year old self, how whatever it was.
No, I know, me too. Like I had no idea this was even a thing until I started playing these video games. And around that time, I also started playing Civilization, and this would have been 1 and 2. I think Civilization 3 comes out in 2001, so that's a little bit later, but 2 is ridiculously good. I played a ton of that. That's a turn-based strategy game. But so really it was Age of Empires 1 and 2, and then Civ 1 and 2. This is all before the year 2000. That's when my course was set.
Nice. Yeah, I'm thinking. I think. Okay, so maybe my first introduction to strategy games was the adults being like, "Oh, SimCity, it's great," and I tried to play it, and I'm like, "This is dumb. I can't figure any of this out." And then later on, I'm a little bit older, and I saw Lords of the Realm. Well, the second one, and it's like, "Ooh, there's a knight, and he's on a horse." And then it's just, dude, I sunk hours into that as a kid. And my dad called me on it one day. He's like, "Would you just play the game rather than like setting your bushels of wheat to 1,000 and giving yourself all the bonuses?" It's like, oh, but the game's really hard. Yep.
Yeah, I played that too. Some I didn't play it as much as you. Like I said, I played more Age of Empires than Civ, but Lords of the Realm 2 had that great intro. I love that intro.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that was Sierra back in the day. Like I remember even back when they were doing DOS stuff, that you would get like the 16-bit colors and they do the blink, and then it's I don't know, it was wild.
Oh, speaking of OG, did you talk about Lords of the Realm 2? I lost it, darn it. There was another OG game that most people don't remember, but I just lost it, so keep going.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, so here's why strategy. I think we talked about that a little bit. Mainly history on your end. Is that fair?
Right. So mainly, yes, history. That's initially what brought me into it, and of course, again, with all sorts of provisos, these are video games. History's streamlined. There's also the rule of fun. So of course, they want the games to be fun. But it's a great introduction because if you're 11 years old, you're not going to crack open Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. It ain't going to happen. But another reason why you play strategy games is it teaches you problem solving skills. It really does. And real time strategy games teach you to think on your feet, not
And you
just.
don't realize that in the moment. That's the beauty of learning.
No, right. You don't realize that at the moment. So, but looking back, right? So turn-based strategy games were very planning oriented. Not to say that you don't plan an RTS, you do, but what that really does is it trains you more to think quickly on your feet. Whereas with RTS games, they tend to rely more on a rock, paper, scissor mechanism. So a good example, we both played Age of Empires 2. Pikeman beats Knight, Knight beats Swordsman, Swordsman beats Pikeman, right? That's just one way to look at it. By the way, did you ever play Empire Earth?
No. I didn't do that. I didn't do StarCraft. Dude, if you name big ones, I probably didn't do it. I'm not sure why. It just wasn't in my wheelhouse for the most part.
Right, that's fine. So, but because it's like more rock, paper, scissory, and things can happen so fast, you have to like adapt on your feet. Planning is, I would say, a less important because remember, in a turn-based strategy game, you make all your moves and then end your turn, and the other guy makes all his moves and ends his turn. So thinking on your feet isn't necessarily, especially if it's play by email, because you might have a whole day between turns, right? So it's not really teaching you to think on your feet, but it is teaching you to plan ahead. Whereas RTSs, again, have some planning, but it's more thinking on your feet and quickly responding to situations.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting way of looking at it because I do have a little bit of time in like Final Fantasy Tactics. I think back in the day I did a little bit of Tactics Ogre, sort of those JRPG strat games. Put some time into that, and oh doggone it, what's the one we were talking about it? The not Breath of the Wild. Oh,
Tooth and Tail.
Turn based. No, good one. No, the it's a Nintendo one. Doggone it, Fire Emblem. There we go.
Oh, Fire Emblem. Okay.
Yeah, it's turn based, and so it's just working through that. And I think that was a good separation you did between them. Sort of one is strategic planning. It's chess, right? And then the other one is there's an aspect of planning, and you just got to keep moving. Got to keep moving. Very cool.
Yeah. And so let's just summarize quickly again why strategy games. Number one, most strategy games are historically based, though by no means all. You're going to learn a lot of history. It's a great way for young people to learn about history. Two, It teaches you turn-based strategy games teach you long-term planning skills, and then RTS strategy games teach you to think on your feet quickly. So all three of these are reasons to play strategy games. So, for example, I mean, I've had parents ask me, "Can I should I let my kids play Age of Empires?" I'm like, "Yes, yes, let your kids play Age of Empires." That's not even a question you should ask.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to dig too heavy on it because at the end of the day, it's a game. There's allowances that have to be made, but the more you play it and the more you start thinking about the different resources that people had access to and the different tactics that people had access to, the different army units, it's pretty interesting in that you can start seeing how these civilizations started to play out, how these resources were applied, the different tactics, and what made them think in such a way that they were either successful in conquering or were conquered themselves.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it is a video game, so things are streamlined. But generally speaking, yeah, they do try to capture the spirit, the essence of these civilizations. So, like, let's go back to Age of Empires too. If you played the Conquerors expansion, where they added unique technologies, which I love that. The Byzantines were great because they had the cataphracts, and you could upgrade them. I think it was called logistics or logistica to have trample damage, and that's usually only reserved for elephants. So you could have this like little army of cataphracts just stomping all the infantry to pieces. It was so brutal.
Yeah, it's lovely. All right, so hey, here's a goofy one for you. What do we think about the Oregon Trail?
Uh,
Strategy game, yes or no?
well, it would fall within the context of resource management, which I think is a kind of strategy game. Now, resource management games are much more prevalent now than they were then. There weren't that many resource management games. But yeah, I love Oregon Trail 3. It also, too, Oregon Trail 3 and Oregon Trail in general was a part of a brief period where they tried to have what was called edutainment, educational and entertaining games. There was also a
Oh
game called
yeah,
there was also a game called Amazon Trail where you'd sail up the Amazon. That was fun as well. Um, I don't think it was quite as good as Oregon Trail because they didn't have a coherent like narrative around it. Whereas Oregon Trail, you're going from like St. Louis to out west. The other thing that I liked now this was fun. This is some deep lore. Okay, so when I was a kid, we're talking maybe like middle school. I had a friend that had Oregon Trail 3, and I later bought a copy in my 20s and started playing it again too. But when I was in middle school, I would play it with him, and I got really good at like keeping my party alive. At one point, we were hunting in a hunting sequence, and this guy had like the gun misfire, and I'm like, we're both in middle school, and we have these lists of things to do to treat the wound. And the guy, and one of them was like pour salt in the wound. I'm like, no, like we even have a saying, don't pour salt in an open wound. And the guy's like, no, I'm gonna do it. And then it says, you killed him. And it's like, no, what'd you do? Um, but I was homeschooled, so there was this historical reenactment location that was supposed to like represent Ohio when it was the frontier back in the 1820s. And there was this little like action demo game where like all of us kids would split up into like groups of two, and we would be given like money, quote unquote, to buy and auction things that we would need to go out west. And on the reverse side of these cards, there'd be like a little red dot or something which indicated you bought a necessity. So me and this kid, I have no idea who he was at this point. Because I played Oregon Trail 3, I knew what to get. Now, granted, I couldn't buy everything at auction because we didn't have enough money. But of all the options of things you could buy, things that were, on the one hand, necessities and things that were just luxuries, my team, we had half of all of the actual necessities. And I had to, because we, shared the budget, I had to buy a few luxuries because my teammate was fighting me. We would have had more if it had just been me. But because of me playing Oregon Trail 3, I won that game. That sort of like action demo amongst my peers.
nice, very good. Yeah, well, and it jumps back to what we were saying again earlier about the history aspects. What I remember doing on that, sort of like what you were talking about, dude, there was a book in there that you could get into, and you could read about lavender, and you could read about butterflies and salt and cast iron, and you could almost concoct solutions to the problem based on what you were reading in the book.
Yes.
And there were still guide rails there that limited some of it, but sometimes they would give you an off the wall option. And you're like, oh, that might work.
Yeah, exactly. And I loved it how I would again, the guidebook in the game that you could flip through, like, oh, is this safe to
Yep.
eat or not? I definitely went through that too. It was fun.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, great game. And like you said, resource management. I'm trying to think. I don't really think it was a thing back then. Maybe like SimCity-ish type stuff, but not the hardcore stuff we have nowadays. So.
Oh well, the other resource management games were the Tycoon games, Railroad Tycoon,
Oh,
Zoo
Zoo
Tycoon.
Tycoon.
Zoo Tycoon. Did you play that?
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
Did you get the expansion, Marine Marina, and the Dinosaur Digs?
Dinosaur Digs, yes. I don't know if we did the Marina one.
Okay.
Did they come together? Maybe. I can't remember.
When I bought them, they were all bundled together in the single package at some discount electronics store. But,
yeah.
But yeah, it's
Zoo Tycoon was wild.
Yeah, really good. So I guess there was some.
Yeah, you're right. There was some. And I might be off the wall here, but could you put a giraffe in with a tiger or a lion and then get eaten?
Yeah, you could. That would be a move. You could.
Fair enough. Let's see. All right, so hey, dig into Civilization for me. What was good about it? What did you like about it? Why Civilization over some of the others?
Civilization is like the holy grail of strategy games, man. It's just so good. So Civilization, what makes, in addition to being turn-based, right? What makes Civilization different than, say, Age of Empires is Age of Empires is limited to a time, right? Antiquity, the Middle Ages. So technological development there's not a lot going on, right? That's not the point of the game, right? Now, some RTS games did have technological development, like, say, Rise of Nations or Empire Earth, if you want to, But Civilization was based on that primarily, advancing down the ages. So you go from the Stone Age to the Space Age, basically. And you build cities, and there's the build tall versus build wide dichotomy. So a few cities that are very dense, or a lot of low population cities. And well, there was just so much going on. And by the time you get to like Civ 5, which in my estimation is probably if not the best Civ game, I didn't play as much 6 as 5, but man, 5 was so good. They added so many layers. It's like a holistic experience. It's like the civilization you're playing is like a living, breathing organism.
So where would you, in the whole Civilization series, would you start at 5 or would you start at 1, sort of work your way up so you get that sense of wonder and achievement with what they're doing in the 5th one? Or
well, that's a good question. Well, right now you can't really play 1 and 2 because Steam only goes up to 3 and up, unless you can somehow get old copies and run them on, I don't know, some client or something. I don't know, but I suppose you could if you wanted to. I wouldn't say no. But part of the problem, see, you and I have nostalgia for these older games because we kind of played them when they were cutting edge. And so we have a soft spot for these older games. That may not really be because they're no longer cutting edge, right? So if you're new to the genre and you just want to pop it in, it won't have the same effect for you because you're going to be expecting more. Like you and I weren't expecting more. What we got was beyond our wildest dreams, right? We just oh wow, it's like Age of Empires 2, right? We didn't think of anything more than that, right?
Oh yeah, well, and that's sort of the idea. Dude, have you ever gone back and played Sonic the Hedgehog, the first one?
I didn't play those kinds of video games much.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's a little bit different than strat games. That first one's rough. You go back and play it. It's rough. There's no spin dash, and it just you can see the seed there, but it hasn't really been watered, and you can pretty much toss the first one to me. But the only thing that's holding you there is nostalgia, like you're talking about. So that's a fair point on all these.
I would say start with 5. 3 and 4. Okay, the main reason why I say 5 is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1 and 2, of course, are different because of the first two. Had what's called stacking, where you could have multiple units stacked on a single tile. I never was a fan of that because I preferred the more traditional turn-based strategy games where you have like one unit per tile and you know like a chessboard, right? And you do it that way. Now that's fixed in Civ 5 and 6, and I'm guessing now 7. They do have a more tactical based combat system in that regard than they did. Because aesthetically, for me, I don't like Doom stacks because it kind of ignores the principle of logistics. Like, how are you going to have like I don't know 20 legions on a single tile and feed them all, right? I mean, the video game doesn't represent logistics, so you can just kind of have this ridiculous Doom stack, and it's like boo, boo.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, it's how I'm thinking too. Like RPG systems, tabletop systems. It's how gritty do you want to get? What makes it good to you? Is it the realism or is it the Gonzo? You can have an immense amount of units with no resource management just because you like to watch things go boom. So you can find the game out there for you. So that's
You know,
interesting about Civ 5. That might be where I need to start one day.
yeah, and the other thing I'd want to say too is 2 to 3 is a big, big leap. So 1 and 2 are basically bare bones, kind of like your original Sonic game, and that's fine. You got to start somewhere, right? 3 and 4 are exploring ideas that are not really fully realized until 5, and so they're transitional. So like if you played them when they were coming out and they were brand new and cutting edge, that's one thing. And I played a lot of Civ 3, but it'd be hard to go back to because you could see where they're going and they just weren't able to do it yet until Civ 5. And so it's like you could just skip 3 and 4, I think, unless you really wanted to play them.
Fair enough. Now, what's the deal with Civ 6? Because, again, I don't really have any familiarity with the games, but I'm hearing that 6 is like, oh man, that's not, you don't really want to mess with that one. Where's that argument coming from? What's the frustration with it?
Well, I don't really know too much about the argument against Civ 6. Civ 6 um has some interesting elements. I got the anniversary edition when it came out because it had like montage stuff to all the earlier Civ games with an art book and all sorts of cool stuff. But some people don't like Civ 6 because it's like secretly woke coded. Because like there's a lot of like female rulers. Okay, not that there weren't female rulers in previous Civ games, there were, but they're clearly canned, right? They're not. So like in Civ 3, they had Joan of Arc. Okay, well, Joan of Arc is a well-known historical figure. That makes sense, right? Even though she never led France, well, I'm not as a ruler, as a spiritual leader, maybe. Uh,
It was inadvertent. Yeah, yeah.
it made sense, right? Or like in Civ 5, Russia is led by Catherine the Great. These are famous characters that we know. But there's like female characters in Civ 6 that are clearly shoehorned. They're not well known. And they're not really like, for example, France is led by Catherine de Medici. It's like, what? Yeah, that's not who led France. You know, and so there's a feeling that some of this is pandering a little bit. But that's not gameplay critique, I suppose. But gameplay, I like they added a religious victory condition, which was new. They didn't have that before, not even in Civ 5. So that I think was actually really cool. They also added religious warfare. So, in addition to having your regular units shoot each other, you could have your monks and your preachers and your inquisitors duel it out on almost like a separate mini game.
Yeah, so this sounds pretty crazy. I'm actually I'm trying to plot some time right now, wondering if I can jump into this.
So I would say I would not say skip Civ 6. Civ 6 has its strengths. I think I didn't play it as much as 5. But I wouldn't diss on it. I think there's some stylistic complaints which don't really affect the gameplay that much. So there's that.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. So that is, to my understanding, even more than Age of Empires or anything, this is the granddaddy of the RTS strats. But that will segue us right into Age of Empires. I put 2 up there. I'm familiar with 2. I played a little bit of 1. I played a lot of 2. Jump into it. Tell us where you're at on Age of Empires.
Well, I'll just say this, Wandering Panda. There's Age of Empires fans and then there's Age of Empires fans. If you didn't play 1, if you didn't play Rise of Rome, I don't know what to say. Like this is like the entryist, Zoomer kid trying to break in on the Xer D&D session. It's like, come on, you're not a part of this. But no, but in reality, Age of Empires 2 is a classic. The two main improvements that it added was the idea of a queue. Well, no, the queue was added in Rise of Rome, but they really made it better. And a queue is where you can just, if you have enough resources, you just keep on clicking on the unit you want to train, and you can queue up 10 swordsmen, and then they'll, one at a time they'll come out. And there was some other UI they did that was really helpful. Oh, the farm seeding. That was brutal in Age 1. You had to manually redo every single farm. But in Age 2, you go to the mill and just seed all the farms. That was just a quantum leap. You can't go back after farm seeding. That was just so good.
See, so this is interesting. I was actually looking up Rise of Rome. I think I owned it. So what it was it was a Christmas, and we were given Age of Empires 2, and we were also given the original. I'm thinking that Rise of Rome came with the original. However, yeah, I totally cheated, and I put a little bit of time into the first one, and I was like, I don't know, man. These animations, it was purely aesthetic and inconvenience. So I was like, no, I want to be a king. I don't want to be like some wanderer.
The other thing that for me was kind of like disappointing at first as a kid, elephants and cataphracts were standard units that a good chunk of the different civilizations could build in Age 1. In Age 2, with the addition of unique units, the cataphract was unique to Byzantium and the elephant was unique to Persia. And I'm like, no, I can't build elephants and cataphracts like I used to with all these different civs.
Fair enough. Hey, tell me if I'm totally misremembering here. And I can't remember if it was campaign or if it was just the play style and the civilizations I was picking in the first Age of Empires. Did you get bogged down a lot in ship battles in the first one?
First one. What do you mean by bogged down a lot?
Just like there were a bunch of ship battles. Like I don't remember any ship battles from Age of Empires 2. I mean there were, but
I would say for me it's the reverse. I would usually get control of the sea in Age 1 really fast, and I would just knock out all the ports and the docks, and they're just pretty much over. Whereas Age 2, I remember having massive naval battles, huge. That's why I love the Koreans. The turtle ships were so good.
Okay.
So for me, it was the opposite.
Interesting. See, now I gotta go back and put some time into Age of Empires one of these days. I mean, and this is one of those like we've already talked about. I probably need to go back, sort of polish off some of that nostalgia on the first one, decide how rough or how good I think it is, and then move up to Age of Empires 2 and just relive the glory days.
Well, by the way, Wandering Panda, there's definitive HD editions to all the Age of Empires games, so you don't have to worry about some of the less pleasant UI. It's already been fixed.
All right. Fair enough. Just jump on Steam and grab that.
Yeah, just do that.
Okay. Fair enough.
No, but with Age of Empires 2, the big changes. The civilizations become a little more distinct because there were no unique units, there were no castles, there were no unique technology in Age 1. The uniqueness of the civilizations was the aesthetics of their architecture and just what units they could build. And, you have to start somewhere, and it was fine. But like Age 2 adds this extra layer. Like, oh, well, everybody has a unique unit now. Everybody has a castle.
Berserkers.
Yeah, berserkers. And then everybody has, unique technologies. And it's like, well, that's really cool. Now, with regards to Age of Empires 1, I beat the Great Campaign. I beat the Egyptian campaign. I beat all the Roman campaigns except the final one where you have to fight Attila the Hun. I didn't beat that. I beat the Enemies of Rome campaign, but I did not beat Babylon, did not beat... I'm trying to think of some of the other Age of Empires ones I didn't beat. But, Babylon. Oh, I beat the Yamato. Yeah, that was fun. Age of Empires 2, I beat all of the ones from the first one except Saladin. So I beat Barbarossa, Joan of Arc, the Mongols, and then the Training William Wallace campaign. And then in the Rise of Rome, I
I
beat
forgot about the William Wallace. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, that was good.
and the not the Rise of Rome in the Conquerors campaign, I beat El Cid, I beat Attila the Hun, and I beat what was the Aztec. That was fun. And then there were the mini battles, the Conquerors battles, like 1066 Hastings or 1071 Mainzikert. I beat all of those, so I really clocked in the time.
Yeah, that's. I'm just remember. Was it the French that marched through Byzantium in the campaign?
Oh, that was Germany, Barbarossa. I played that one too.
Okay, okay, yeah, and I just remember that, and that's like I said, man, going back being a kid and being like, this is weird, man. Like, what the world? Very cool.
Yes, very cool.
Yep. All right, so compare it if you would. Age of Empires, Civ. What's the difference in gameplay? What's the difference in the vibe? Like, and do you have a preference, or are they different experiences?
Well, like I said, turn-based strategy games are more long-term planning. RTS games are more thinking fast on your feet. So that's going to be a really big. So, for example, especially with the idea of the rushing strategy, which became increasingly popular amongst online gamers, games could be very quick, like 30 minutes. Okay, Civilization game, it's going to take hours, hours and hours and hours. It's very long. Um, it's going to be a real investment, and so that's the main difference.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point about the online play and sort of the skirmish factor that that started being built towards. I have no familiarity with them, but I'm sort of assuming that's where games like some of the 40K licensed stuff. That's more where they're headed is quick battle. Is that fair? Do you have any familiarity with them? I guess
What game? Sorry.
the Warhammer games and some of the other RTSs that are out nowadays.
Well, I mean, I played Dawn of War 1 and 2. They were definitely leaning in more to quick. I don't know if it'd be half an hour. Sometimes it might be an hour, but it's an hour when it's like 3v3. I mean, if it's 1v1 or 2v2, then maybe it's going to be shorter. And we didn't bring up Total War, but Total War is it's a combination of turn-based and RTS.
Interesting. So, trying to figure out how lost I want to get into that. Let's work through some of this, and we might circle back to because I think the online play that you really tapped on something I didn't think about, in that changes a lot of what we're trying to achieve with an RTS and the experience as it goes on.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I thought you were asking me a question. Keep going.
And I was just kind of thinking out loud that there's definitely at least two major vibes going on between building up your civilization and working through the campaign or working through the idea of the civilization versus the quick on your feet resource management skirmish engage in the online battles.
I think the secondary difference between Age of Empires and Civilization is in Civilization you do go through the ages of time. So you will go from a warrior with a stone club to a stealth bomber, right? I mean, you're going to go all the way, right, to that, and you just won't get that in Age of Empires. You won't get airplanes. You'll never get that far. So the time dimension is very different. It has a very different feel to it.
Very cool. All right, so we've got Age of Empires. We did Civ. So Westwood, I have no familiarity with other than the pictures. Right, I remember seeing the pictures of them, and it seemed like there were hundreds of these games, and they were on PlayStation 1. They were on PC. They might have even been on Saturn. I don't know. So jump into Westwood. Tell me what are we looking at, and where do we start if we're saying Command and Conquer?
Wow, Command and Conquer is so good. Okay, so in this regard, it's a little bit more like Age of Empires than it is Civ because it's real time strategy. Though it's modern warfare, so you have airplanes and depending on which version of Command and Conquer, there may or may not be ships. So in that regard, it's all modern or near future, right? So there's basically there's three broad Command and Conquer uh, genres. There's the non GDI Kane genre, which has Tiberian Dawn, Tiberian Sun. I kind of quit playing that arc afterwards. They had a few other ones like Tiberian Wars. They weren't as good as the original two. Then you had the Soviet Ally era, so Red Alert 1, Red Alert 2, Red Alert 3. Didn't play 3, but played 1 and 2. Then you had Command Conquer Generals, which is just like war on terror near future. You have Islamists, China, and the USA. It's that was a blast. Wow.
What was so? Would you say Generals is where you start?
Well, this is the thing, right? All the Command and Conquer now is on Steam, so I mean, you could just grind your way from the beginning. I think that would actually be easier than it would be for Civilization because Civ 1 and 2 aren't on Steam, and it would be hard to get them to run on a modern day PC. Second of all, I think a lot of some of the UI has been fixed again for the digital versions. See, Command and Conquer is very story driven, and so it kind of behooves you to start from the beginning. Unless, of course, you do play Generals, which is kind of not continuity with the rest of them. Um, Red Alert and then the Tiberian universes have some continuity overlap, some continuity issues, but they're meant to be kind of like sister universes, whereas Generals is not. It's basically near future war on terror. They actually had a campaign where the terrorists win and the United States becomes an isolationist power. I couldn't believe they had that.
I kind of like that campaign.
And then from the Generals universe, China ends up winning. They have to protect Europe from an Islamic takeover.
Wait, what? China has to protect Europe?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
From an Islamic takeover. That's how Generals ends.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that's fun. So, what was the when you're jumping into the whole Command and Conquer? Is it super action oriented? Is it more resource management? Is it what are the highlights? What's sort of the gameplay theory in this one versus the other two?
Well, so in Age of Empires, you have 4 resources: food, wood, stone, and gold. Right. Civilization has. By the time you get to Civ 5, you're juggling a lot of different resources: culture, science, money, religion. It gets really complicated, but there's really only one resource in Command and Conquer, and that's just if it's the Tiberium universe, it's Tiberium, and if it's the Red Alert universe, it is ore, I guess like iron ore, and then in the Generals universe, it's just these pallets of resources or oil derricks. So you one of your strategies is to attack enemy harvesters, enemy resource collectors, so that they just can't build anything. I mean, that is, going after the economy is a valid strategy in this game. But you have all sorts of strategies. You could build up an air force and just start, hammering away at key buildings. That works especially in Red Alert 2, but also some degree in Generals. The Air Force, I think, isn't handled properly, and then also in Red Alert, you can do that as well. So
I feel like that's what I did on Advanced Wars. Was I was always trying to kill buildings just to cost more to make the guys. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you do want to like cut off their economy, and so that's definitely a viable strategy. But you could also rush and just get a bunch of cheap early game units and overwhelm the defenses. That's another thing.
The classic orc strategy.
Yeah, and but part of what makes Generals or Command and Conquer so iconic is they're story driven in the FMVs. Like it really would not have been the same series of games without that. It just wouldn't.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. As I remember it, this came out like I said, PlayStation 1, so that was 1995. And I remember one of them being on there, but I don't know if that was the first one. When did the first one on PC come out?
Are you talking about Command and Conquer?
Yeah.
Let's see. I would have to say probably the mid 90s, but Tiberium Dawn comes out in 1995. That's actually before Age of Empires. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think Age of Empires 1 was 97 and 2 was maybe 99.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So interesting. But where I was going with the whole Command and Conquer, the whole FMV is just a wild. It's this wild time in that you're getting the stuff going with Doom, and they're trying to figure out what's going on there. And then you've got the Sega CD comes out in like '93, and then you've got Night Trap and Snatcher, and no, not Snatcher, but Night Trap did the FMV, Tomcat Alley, Sewer Shark. And so you had that going on, and so definitely by the time you get into, I think the PlayStation was probably the first time that, and some, let's say some mid-age DOS games right there in 94, 95. That was the first time that FMV just started taking over. And thank God the PlayStation guys eventually got away from that and the insane loading times, and FMV was a mess there for a while. But it was crazy moving from the 16-bit palette and a few frames of movement and getting to actual videos. Just completely insane. And overnight it changed. Like I said, there was a bit of a transition between that into actual 3D graphics, 3D cutscenes. But man, crazy times. And that's what I remember from Command and Conquer was. And so you were talking about the story, and it makes sense to me because all I remember are the FMVs and the because I think they ran a commercial campaign as well, like actual TV commercials is what I'm trying to say.
Huh, wow, I don't remember that, but maybe.
Yeah, I'd have to jump on YouTube and look it up. But it was this weird time, and I never, for whatever reason, just never jumped into the games. But very cool. Let's see, we've got that one. We did the Age of Empire. We did Civ. The only I know one of them. Did you ever do Fallout Tactics?
No, but I did play Fallout 1 and 2.
So here's where I show my weird hand. I never played any of the Fallout games other than Tactics. I have no idea what I'm missing on Fallout.
Well, so Fallout 1 and 2 and then Tactics are basically like top-down isometric RPGs. And then Fallout 3, 4, and whatever we're at now are like more like third-person shooters. They were changed a lot. I never played the shooters, though a lot of people did like them. I just played more the top-down isometric. And so, yeah, Fallout Tactics is very similar gameplay ways to 1 and 2.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, very cool. All right, so Command and Conquer, you could basically start, or I'm sorry, you said you would recommend starting basically at the beginning because you could get them all on Steam.
Yep.
And it's so story driven that you might as well just enjoy the ride.
Yeah. You see, Civilization isn't like that, and neither is Age of Empires. So that's less important. You could if you wanted to, but Command and Conquer, you really would miss out.
Fair enough. Now, on the whole ages of, did you ever do? I know you said you jumped out in Age of Empires 3. Did you ever do Age of Mythology?
No, I never did do that one.
Yeah, because that's sort of my question was, gameplay wise, are there ones that you would recommend? But very well.
I would just say 2. I mean, H2 is really the classic one.
Yeah.
The
expansion.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of expansions now.
Oh, is there really?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See, dude, I've been so out of it. Okay.
No, there's been a renaissance run around 2014, I think. Like independent developers got reincorporated back into Microsoft. And now there's like 4 or 5 expansions total.
No joke. Do you does it still have online? As in, well, let me say, Are
Yeah.
there still people playing it online?
Oh yeah, it's still one of the most popular games out there.
No joke.
Nope, that's real. One of the most popular games out there.
Wow. I might actually gonna have to look into this. All right, fair enough. So we kind of touched on this already. RTSs. A bigger question though: are these the three that you think beginners should start with?
Uh yeah, I mean, Age of Empires, Command and Conquer, Civilization. Those are the big three. Those are the big three. They're just really that good. That doesn't mean there aren't other good turn-based or RTS games, but this is the core that I grew up with, and this is the core that's still quite popular. Hence, Steam re-releasing all of them within the last 5 years.
Yeah, 100%. Now, what is the deal with the Total War games? Are those strategy? Where do those
Yeah,
fall in
so
all
Total
this?
War, I played some early on and less now. They're kind of a blend between. Okay, they're the closest thing to your familiarities. They're like a Big Brother or upgraded version of Lord of the Realms too. So there's like the strategic map mode with provinces and resource management and moving armies around, and then you can attack a city, which be a siege or attack another army, and you get these real time battles. Okay. I played Shogun Total War, Medieval Total War, and Rome Total War, the original Total War games. Uh, there's been a lot more now. I haven't really played much since. I clocked in a lot of time with Shogun and
Shogun's the big one I remember. I didn't play it, but I remember the ad campaigns and all of it with that.
yeah. Well, what makes Shogun cool is they have an opening montage from the Akira Kurosawa film Ran, so that was kind of fun. But yeah, and there was Medieval Total War. I remember there was an expansion where you could just play as like the British Isles, and it was the Viking invasion of like the 8th century. So that was pretty funny. Like you had like Scotland, England, Wales, part of Norway, and then Ireland. It was fun. I think one time I played as the Vikings and conquered like 2/3 and won a partial domination victory. It was fun. And then oh yeah, Rome Total War. That after Rome Total War is when I quit playing. It was I don't know. I know a lot of people like the mashup of turn based and RTS. I wasn't as I prefer one or the other. I'm not as much interested in them being mashed together.
Yeah, fair point. And that play style counts for something, right? Like we play what we like. So
I mean, if you like that, knock yourself out. I mean, there's a ton of Total War games out there, but like I said, I just prefer one or the other.
yeah. Now here's one for you. I think you had mentioned it off air. What I'd been talking about the whole Lords of the Realm too, and you said Stronghold. Is that sort of
Oh,
the same idea? Is it the mix and the mashup, or what's going on with that?
well, no. So like, it's all RTS. It's all RTS, but it's castle building and battles. It's a campaign mode where you conquer provinces in England, but moving forward isn't like you moving troops around. It's just like story driven. It's just there as a visual aid. It's basically real time strategy.
All right, fair enough. Very good, very good. Well, that's more or less what I had. Do you have anything else on strat games and just anything we've covered tonight?
Well, I mean, I'll just say it again. The main reason why you play strategy games, and which is why I think strategy games are better than a lot of other kind of games to play, you learn history, learn how to think on your feet, and you learn long term planning. Uh, Shooters, I just don't see. I guess you could learn history if you played Medal of Honor, right? But to me, it seems like that's not developing the kinds of long term skills. I mean, if you just want to have fun, fine. I mean, that's your jam, right? But like, it doesn't have. I don't see it having the same applicability out in the world.
Wolfenstein really screwed up my understanding of World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were not actual demons roaming the earth during World War II. That was kind of disappointing to learn that. Yeah. Well, fair enough. No, this was great. I'm actually thinking now. Well, because part of what you're hitting on too, I'm remembering when I was a kid. Man, I'm talking. 6, 7, or whatever, once in a great while, maybe once or twice a month, I'd get to play chess with my dad. And it was like, oh man, I'm gonna beat him this time. And looking back, every time I beat him, I'm sure he let me. But it was a little taste of that moving into the RTS games. And so, like you said, that there's just, man, you take over a castle, you actually win the map, and you're like, oh my goodness. Or you finish one of those campaigns in Age of Empires 2. It's nuts.
Yeah, the sense of accomplishment of beating an H2 campaign is so good.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I one time I was online on it was like Modern Warfare 2, I think. Maybe it was the first one. No, it had streaks, and because I streaked and I launched a nuke on everybody and just dominated the map, and that was
Yeah.
fun. That was fun, but man, it's nothing compared to getting to the end of a campaign on a Age of Empires 2 or whatever. So
Oh
good
yeah. Oh yeah.
times. Good times. All right. Well, hey, where can people find you? I've got you up on the screen. I need to jump into the description, play with that a little bit. But you're on X, you're on YouTube. What's your jam?
Well, yeah. So, like I said, you can follow me at Praise the Fight Podcast. That's where I do a lot of my content. But I'm also on X, and I'm interacting more on that platform as well. And what I mostly do is a variety of topics. So I'll have a roundtable discussion every other Saturday where I talk about current events, usually, but not always. History, philosophy, whatever. But in general, I cover history, philosophy, economics, current events, kind of whatever's on my mind. I'll have friends on. I'll have interviews. I had debates in the past. That's not really been successful as a platform idea right now. But interviews, roundtable for just random content that I think is interesting at the moment. But I'm sure there'd be something for somebody because there's just such a wide variety of content.
Yeah, there absolutely is, and I'll double that and say there's there's a lot of stuff that is working on current events. But if you guys go to his channel, you're going to end up finding a lot of more esoteric, really deep diving into the thinking and the theory of political application of is spiritual, maybe is that reaching a little too far? You're definitely getting into, I remember last year you were getting into the ideas of madness and the application of that. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. And the big one for me, I think it was last year that you did the end of war. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a spicy one. Yeah.
That was a good one. That was a good one. I quite enjoyed working through that one. So by all means, guys, get out there, jump on Folly's podcast, check him out on X. And my little shill for this week is if you go to the Jonathan Pedro Clips channel, you're gonna find a conversation that he had with what's his name, Matt Frad, the Pints with Aquinas dude. Anyway, this idea of there's never going to be enough proof of God. There's never going to be enough proof for faith. But sort of the argument there is our whole existence is operating on faith. And so it's how does that interchange of faith and expectation interact with the Gospels, with God? It's a 10-minute video. Thought it was well worth watching. That's my show for the week. And y'all take it easy. Thanks, Todd.
Yep. Thank you.